Once again, Hafaday and welcome. This is the Hafaday, thank you. We have a very participatory audience this morning. Our next panelist, introducing our next panelist will be Dr. Nick Gottfried's, a professor from Library Science and Micronesian Studies. Dr. Gottfried's.
Hafaday. Bula. I'd like to introduce our panelists, first of all. Dr. Janesh Chand is the Foundation Vice Chancellor of the Fiji National University. He holds a PhD in economics from the New School of Social Research, New York, and a BA and MA in economics from the University of the South Pacific. Previously, he has been the director of the Fiji Institute of Technology, which has merged with other government higher education institutes to form the Fiji National University. He was also the director of the independent research organization, the Fiji Institute of Applied Studies. He also led the creation of the University of Fiji, which began operations in 2005, and was a lecturer and senior lecturer at the University of the South Pacific from 1982 to 1999, the same year in which he was elected to Fiji's House of Representatives, holding the cabinet portfolios of national planning, local government, housing, and environment. He has served on the councils of the University of the South Pacific, the University of Fiji, the Fiji Institute of Technology, and currently the Council of the Fiji National University, and the chairperson of the Fiji National Research Council. He is the author of several books, numerous academic papers, and continues to serve as editor of Fijian Studies, a journal of contemporary Fiji. Please give me a warm Hafaday welcome to Dr. Chand. Dr. Mary Ann Young Okada became the first female president and chief executive officer of the Guam Community College in 2007. Dr. Okada formerly held financial-related positions within the college, including vice president of financial affairs, controller, and general accounting supervisor. She has also served as comptroller for the Department of Education. During her tenure as president, Dr. Okada has overseen the creation of several new programs in response to community needs, as well as the construction and renovations on the college campus. Through her administrative and financial leadership, the Guam Community College has received a qualified status as a low-risk auditee for 11 consecutive years. She is a member of several post-secondary education councils, board chairperson for the Pacific Islands branch of the nonprofit organization WestCare, and has aggressively advocated for the development and growth of career and technological education for Guam and Micronesia. Among her other organization memberships is the Pacific Post-Secondary Education Council, the American Association of Community Colleges, and the American Association of University Women. She holds a doctorate in educational leadership from the University of Phoenix and from the University of Guam, an MPA in Public Administration, and a BA in Business Administration. Please help us welcome Dr. Okada. Dr. Alfredo Pascual is the president of the University of the Philippines, a university with over 15 campuses spread across the country, over 50,000 students and 13,000 faculty and staff. Previously, Dr. Pascual has served as president of the University of the Philippines Alumni Association and as a member of the University Board of Regents. Dr. Pascual has an extensive background as a finance professional and educator, particularly at the Asian Development Bank, where he served in positions such as advisor for public-private partnerships, director of infrastructure finance, director of private sector operations, and senior investment officer. He pursued pioneering projects and institution building initiatives that helped the bank to respond to emerging financial needs in Asia and catalyze investments in the region's developing economies. He has also had several years' experience helping to prepare managers for Asia as the American Express Professor of Finance at the Asian Institute of Management. He was also the lead convener of the Automated Electronic System Watch, an independent multi-sector coalition that monitored and assessed the Philippines' first ever nationwide poll automation in May 2010. Dr. Pascual has a BS degree in chemistry and an MBA from the University of the Philippines. He attended the EECAS EAN teacher program on management of strategic and organizational change at the Euro-Asia Center in Instead, France, trained at Numier Securities in Tokyo, and was conferred the honorary doctorate of pedagogy degree by Angeles University Foundation. Please give me a warm Hafa Adai welcome to Dr. Pascual. I'd like to begin with a very generic question that isn't in the program, and I have other very specific questions I'd like to ask, but of course we invite questions from the audience as well. Our first basic question is, what is your university's role as an agent of political and social change in your society?
Thanks, Nick. First of all, let me congratulate the University of Guam for the 60th anniversary, and the University and President Underwood for inviting me to participate in the events. I also want to thank Dr. Ricardo Fernandez for a very thought-provoking address this morning. I think he has touched some of the fundamentals of the roles of universities as they have emerged. In my opinion, modern universities' core function is social and political change. How do we do that depends on the visions of the founders and the council and the regions and the boards. For me, the important matter, and I take the cue from Ricardo's overall perspective on the evolution of universities. Universities seem to have evolved from commons to a highly privatized set of institutions where entry was reserved for the select few, and now the tendency seems to be that the universities are going to go back to commons. Now in Fiji, we have had for many years a university system which reserved entry only to a select few, until many of us began to agitate, being educated at the new school and also coming from the left tradition, to expand access to tertiary education for the large majority of the people. Now that agitation, of course, fell on deaf ears, both at the policy-making level and within the university community. What it meant was that students had to struggle to get a seat in the university. Students' results would come out around December, January, but they had to apply for positions well before that. So if a student wanted to enter a university, say late December or early January, he had to wait for one more year. Now those were situations which we confronted all the way up to about 2000, 2004, 5. We began to change this, and the attempt to change that was through the creation of the University of Fiji, and later on through the state initiative of creating the Fiji National University. Now all universities, all three, are responding to the need for the students to have access to higher education, and student enrollment has shot up significantly. So that is, in my own opinion, a first attempt at increasing access to not only tertiary education, but to a new way of thinking. Because with tertiary education comes new knowledge. For me, access to new knowledge, to a wider variety of thoughts, to texts, to internet, to literature, to professors, that itself is creating social and political change. But not only so in terms of that environment in which students exist, also in terms of taking education to the people. Now, Fiji is a society where the income levels are not very high. Poverty rate is around 30 to 35%. So the challenge for us has been to take education to the people. And we have been doing that through a number of measures, including establishing from this year a specific project to take relevant vocational education to people who missed out education in the rural areas. Whatever craft skills they need to upgrade their skills to start earning a livelihood at a higher level, what we call a sustainable development livelihood project. Other than that, there are two other matters which I want to focus on. One of them has to do with teaching people. Now, Fiji society has been a society riddled with coups. Some of you may know that we have had, every 5 years on average, a military coup or a coup by terrorists. Many of us have been victims of that. I recognize Tupeni Mbamba here. He was a fellow hostage with me in the year 2000 for 56 days. Now, in an environment which is highly divided on the basis of ethnicities, political opinions, religion, looks, etc., the role of universities becomes very fundamental. How to bring people together. Now, I'm very encouraged by Guam itself, where a lot of people have been, it's like a melting pot. And I don't see the kind of tensions that we have seen in Fiji for long. So for me, the role of the Fiji National University is important from that point of view, as one which can create a sense of one Fiji. And I think we have been succeeding to some extent. We are only 2.5 years old, but now there is a new identity which seems to be emerging within Fiji. And our university is at the forefront of creating that new identity. Other than that, I think the other very critical point is, and Ray had mentioned this to some extent in relation to Philippines, it's the creation of knowledge for the development of the society. Because ultimately people's views change depending on the material conditions of living that they have. And the material conditions of living come from not only their own ability to harness the resources that are available to them, but also seeing the impact of the university in society. For example, if you produce good engineers who can make you good roads, ensure continuity of water supply, electricity, etc., it changes people's perception. So these are some of the ways in which the Fiji National University has been able to be an agent of social and political change. We are operating in a very difficult environment. We have got a military regime which has brought about certain fundamental changes in Fiji. A lot of them are positive changes which we endorse. We are on the eve of elections, so for us as a university, we have to steer ourselves very clearly, not become so involved in the process so as to lose our independence, but also sufficiently involved so that we remain relevant to the process. Thank you, Nick.
Thank you, Dr. Chan. Dr. Okada, the same question. What is your university's role as an agent of political and social change?
First of all, I'd like to thank Dr. Underwood for including the Pacific Post-Secondary Education Council in this forum today, and for Dr. Leon Richards for making the assignment for me to represent PPEC. This is going to be, this is not going to be the Guam Community College's role or a reflection of our institution, but I'm going to provide some kind of overview of actually what's happening in some of our institutions that are included in Pacific Post-Secondary Education. First of all, PPEC consists of members, the presidents of the American Samoa Community College, the College of Micronesia and the Federated States, the College of the Marshall Islands, the Palau Community College, the Northern Marianas College, the University of Hawaii at Hilo, University of Hawaii Manoa, and of course the University of Guam. And so as a representative group, the PPEC has very specific initiatives that we've been trying to move forward for the past several years. We have received funding through the Department of Interior to help move these initiatives forward. But let me just give you some of the, before I speak about the political and social impacts, let me just give you or paint a little bit of an overview of what some of these institutions face. Many years ago, before funding was provided to PPEC, many of our sister colleges in the region have had difficult times in maintaining accreditation. And that's been a significant thing for us because, with the exception of Hawaii and Guam, their college is the only college or the only institution on their island for further education. And so that's very significant. So in the past several years, there have been challenges in maintaining that accreditation. Many of you are in the education field, and so you've seen how the colleges have gone from probation to warning to show cause. You've seen the levels of their accreditation status. And so that's very important. So what PPEC has trying to do, and one of the major reasons PPEC started back in 1981 was to address the needs and the concerns of the post-secondary institutions for our region. So this is a regional effort. We're very fortunate to have members of UH Hawaii, Hilo, Manoa, and the University of Guam to help in building institutional capacity for our region. Some of these institutions don't have the funding, they don't have the expertise. In their own institutions, they don't even have faculty members that have associate's or bachelor's degrees. And so that becomes a struggle for the K-12 system and the post-secondary institutions as well. So we've, students in many parts of these regions, English is a second language. Their institution is not located on a single island. There are multiple islands. Students have to travel to go to get post-secondary education. Some of the region is still on dial-up. So they don't have the accessible internet connectivity that many of us enjoy on a daily basis. And so that's basically some of the framework underlying what PPEC does or what these institutions face on a daily basis. So are there political and social implications? Absolutely. If one of those institutions were to close, what would be the political impact for that organization? Some of the students come to Guam, some of them go to the United States, some of them go to Hawaii, and they can't speak English. And so ESL has been one of the major components of PPEC funding for the past several years. We've had representatives from the University of Guam and also from the Honolulu Community College system that have provided ESL training for our faculty members. We've also participated in accreditation standards review, assessment, defining what student learning outcomes are for all of these, because it's not any different. It's not any different from the California Community College system or anywhere else. The standards are the same. But we just don't have, for most part, we don't have the resources to sustain that type of support for these institutions. And so as we think about what the political and social impacts are for these organizations, it requires us to engage into partnerships, like with UH and with the University of Guam, on a consistent and continual basis. Not one project, not two projects, but many projects. There's a lot of knowledge out there in the region, whether it be traditional or cultural knowledge. There's a lot that can be shared. And so, you know, with that collaborative agreement that we have with all these institutions, it helps for us to build not just our own individual institutions, but our region. It helps us build the capacity of our region. In a recent at Higher Education Summit in Washington, D.C., one of the presidents from the PPEC institution member stood up and said, "Faculty have not been given a raise in over 20 years. Presidents that are earning money in the United States, the president at their college, half, if not 1/3. Students, when they graduate from school, they have to work 2 to 3 hours just to pay for a gallon of gas." So is there an impact? Absolutely. There are also representatives here, I know, from the legislature that participate in the Asian Pacific Island, APIL, other organizations. And the Micronesian chiefs also meet on a regular basis. Education is key for many of these areas to grow their economies, to build the next level of leaders. If you look in the region, a lot of times they have to import people or bring people in from the outside to help facilitate you know, their educational system. And many of them, we've been very blessed that they've been able to go to the islands and to assist. But there's so much more work that can be done in the region. And there's a lot of expertise here in the room and a lot of collaborative agreements that can be entered into so that the region will prosper, so that our region can build together, so that region, the knowledge can be shared amongst each other. So as we start to think about different initiatives in our respective organizations, we have to think about how else can we reach other institutions in our region to help support them. It's been a very educational experience for me to understand how some of these governments run and how their funding is given to them or not given to them. It's very cyclic. Sometimes they get the money, they have a great president, they get the money, and then a new president comes in and the money's cut. But the number of students that come to these areas, they increase. The number of students that they're seeing at the colleges in the areas have increased. And it's very expensive for them to go off island or to go to another neighboring institution to get their higher education. But what happens when they do get that higher education? Many of them don't go back because there are no jobs to go back to. And so does our organization not, you know, it's not our university, it's not the college. Do we all as a region have an important role in political and social change for our region? Absolutely. And I think with the collaborative efforts that we can all develop and establish here going forward will help us you know, move in the right direction. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Okada. Dr. Pasquale, it's the same question to you. What is your university's role as an agent of political and social change in your society?
Thank you. Well, I'm very happy to be here, and thanks to the invitation of President Underwood. This is giving me the opportunity to share my thoughts with the people of the University of Guam and the Guam, a larger community. Well, the defining character of the University of the Philippines, or UP, has always been its role as an agent of change in the political and social milieu of the country. But the Philippines, in a way, is lucky that it was colonized by a Western power that exports higher educations with great enthusiasm. And the University of the Philippines is an epitome of such move of the Americans during the early 1900s to bring higher education to the Philippines when UP was founded in 1908. Yet from purely American creation, UP quickly became an institution known for harboring intensely nationalistic tendencies. Well, to this day, UP enjoys an unprecedented level of secular liberalism and academic freedom that's well protected by its charter and jealously guarded by its faculty and students. And it is in this atmosphere, that UP has continued to serve as an agent of social and political change in the country. Well, from ousting a political regime, to building new institutions, that has been the role of UP in recent times. I want to talk about the earlier times. At the institutional level, of course, the faculty have acted in unison based on solid economic and other studies, to propose changes to the government and to actually enforce such changes, through mass action. At the level of the individual faculty members, we have seen research output, technical studies being used as a basis for instituting reform in various institutions of the government and of society. And this continuing flow of and back and forth flow of professors going to government service and going back to the academe has provided continuing opportunities for our faculty members to introduce change in institutions in various parts of the government. For example, a study done by a group of faculty members became the basis for the reform of the government at one point in the recent history of the country. Students are able to do their political and social critique via their student publications, which are well respected, in the Philippine society. And with the kind of training that UP provides its students through its general education program, we continue to produce alumni who themselves become agents of change in their respective fields of influence. Another way that the university has been able to serve as an agent of change is its adherence to democratic access. We make sure that the full cross-section of the country is represented in the student body of the university. And in recent times, we have, and with growing cost, like 5 years ago, the tuition fee was raised 3 times to be able to preserve equitable access so that no one is excluded from the UP brand of education because of financial constraints. The university has adopted a socialized tuition fee structure. And this enables students, qualified students, coming from poor families to enroll in UP. And those who are from very poor families are even given monthly stipends. Whereas those coming from the higher income brackets pay the full tuition fee. But this full tuition fee is still not enough to cover the full cost of education. So everybody in UP is subsidized by the government, and they are the scholars of the people, so that that kind of, mindset that is created among the students has served as a basis for their being, for their serving as agents of change after they leave the university. Now, for the university to continue to serve such an agent of change, it has to maintain these two important things. It's being able to provide a protected space through guaranteed academic freedom so that faculty and students will continue to examine social and political realities, subject them to criticism, subject them to reinforcement if needed, and with their insights be able to influence the larger society. And of course, democratic access is very important to ensure that we continue to provide the country with future leaders coming not just from one section of society, not just from the elite, the current elite that is, but from the lowest. I always looked at our university as a great leveler of society, being able to provide opportunities for people coming from the lowest socioeconomic strata of society. And the university is maintaining this to make sure that we continue to produce future leaders who may eventually become the new elite. And this churning of society, I believe, is the basis for continuing change, continuing progress in not only in the economic, but also in the social and political spheres. And that tradition we will keep in the university. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Pascual. Got a few questions here. Okay. Can you speak to rising regionalism or nationalism that's going on in the midst of globalization and the challenges it presents to your university? Dr. Tran.
Interesting question. In Fiji, we have the very well-known regional university called the University of the South Pacific, where I studied. I served for many years, both as an academic staff as well as on the council. That university is owned by 12 governments of the Pacific. When Fiji decided to have its own university, national university, the view across the Pacific was that now Fiji government and Fiji National University is destroying the regional identity. We are going counter-Pacific regionalism. But then soon after, the government of Solomon Islands announced a decision of its own to establish a national university in Solomon Islands. And Vanuatu is following. I think in July they are going to announce their own plan to have a national university in Vanuatu. Now, there is always going to be a tension between regional and national needs. I think it is how you steer yourself to see what can be best provided by national institutions and what can be best provided by regional initiatives. We must always have that balance in mind. I think without that, we would not be able to focus on development of either the nation or the region. I think sometimes by focusing too much on regionalism and everything to do with region, you forget to really build the institutions and the infrastructure which would serve not only the nations but also the region. I'll give one example. Fiji National University is the only university in the Pacific region which provides medical education. It's the only one which provides education in forestry, aviation, maritime studies, and the rest. So while we are a national institution, we also have a very special, and by charter, by our own regulations, provision for reservations of places for students from all over the Pacific.
Thank you, Dr. Chan. Let me just read the question again. Can you speak to rising regionalism or nationalism that's going on in the midst of globalization and the challenges it presents to your university?
I think there's a lot of challenges for the Pacific Post-Secondary Education Council members, particularly in the Micronesian region, because in order for us to participate at a national level or talk about globalization, I think we have to stabilize what we offer just for ourselves in the region. And so there are a lot of organizations. I know that the Fiji School of Medicine has a partnership with the Palau Community College, and so there are international organizations that have gone to the region to offer other educational opportunities for their residents, and so they are participating to some extent in that area. There are also regional efforts that we can do, whether it be with the University of Hawaii or the University of Guam. There's a lot of regional activity. There's also, just because of our location, there's a lot of knowledge, whether it be culturally or traditionally or based on the land grant status, that people across the nation want to learn about. Climate change is one thing that they've come to the region to have discussions on. And and it's just based on tradition, what the fishermen, how they've been talking about climate change and how the islands are affected by that climate change. And so there's several opportunities for national organizations to have and develop knowledge and research in our areas. But again, the fundamental component is to really develop our individual communities and governments before we can go out and expand further.
Thank you, Dr. Okada. Dr. Pascual, can you speak to rising regionalism or nationalism that's going on in the midst of globalization and the challenges it presents to your university?
In our globalized world, it's important that individual countries are placed in a position to compete. So a national university has the role of taking the leadership, in helping its country develop, develop that kind of competitiveness. So that requires a national perspective without losing sight of the need for the country to be a player in the globalized world. Training of the students also has to provide both national and international perspective, because with mobility, global mobility, that is, our graduates, for example, don't end up just working in the country. In fact, many of our graduates work overseas. I see many of them here in Guam, for example, the US, Europe, all over Asia. That's where our graduates go. So, the university is always full of these tensions, being conservative on one hand, being progressive on the other, being precise in science and yet creative, in the art, and being nationalistic while at the same time being international in its perspective. That's what we continue to address, and I think, being nationalistic means preparing the country which we serve to become a global player.
Thank you, Dr. Pascual. I've got kind of a long question here, but I think I can summarize it. It asks about, it refers to the dehumanizing side effects of globalization and the competitive global economic system, and the need to develop educational system that responds to a sense of social responsibility. And I think this actually goes well with the question that I was actually going to ask, and that is, in your view, what constitutes social justice? Is it expanded access to education for those less privileged, or are there other elements that go along with this? Dr. John?
Expanded access to tertiary education is the core value. Why do I say that? It's tertiary education which gives the people, young minds, people who are 18, 19, 20, that wider perspective, the opportunity to interact, to think critically, to test their ideas with fellow students and with professors, to research and to advance. Now, without that opportunity, I don't think there can be social justice. But that is not the end of it. Now, social justice would also include, naturally, creation of an environment where people can express their aspirations, take their own views, either it be in business, entrepreneurship, have the freedom to live, stand up on their own feet and their incomes, or to bring about more fundamental changes in the society. Granted that globalization has a lot of negative effects, and universities' roles are to address these. In the Pacific area, the Southern Pacific to be more precise, we have got a number of regional blocs which have come up. They are talking about free trade. I'll give one example. Our large neighbors, Australia and New Zealand, they are trying to enforce a free regional trade environment. But when we want to export goods to, say, Australia, there will be a lot of barriers to entry. Even Australian companies which come and set up operations in Fiji have been finding very difficult to export things like garments, etc., to Australia, because somewhere along the line someone found one snail on the Australian wharfs, and that snail came from Asia somewhere in transshipment. Now, these kind of barriers are big problems for countries like Fiji, small countries which don't have political clout. There are negative effects as well, the working conditions in the factories and all these. These challenges will always be there for us to confront. But I think at root, access to education and the freedom to think and create and to respond to the challenges, to be the solution, the source of the solutions. I think that is the real source of freedom.
Thank you, Dr. Chan. Dr. Okada, in your view, what constitutes social justice? And you can speak about this, if you'd like, in the context of some of the dehumanizing impacts of globalization.
So social justice as expanding, having access to education, of course, is key, but then also access to lifelong learning, being able to adapt to change, whether it be political change or social change, and to contribute to a greater society with the tools and knowledge associated to do that. And then social justice also encompasses being able to sustain our economies and being able to contribute in that regard.
Dr. Okada. Dr. Brescoe? Go ahead.
Social justice is really giving opportunities to those who otherwise won't be able to make it on their own resources. I was talking about it in terms of democratic access to education, for example, through socialized pricing of university fees. Social justice in the context of globalization means also helping make sure that small operators, small business, for example, are given the opportunities to compete. And the university can play a role by coming up with models on how this can be done. In our university, we are promoting the development of entrepreneurs from students, regardless of their background, to commercialize their inventions and their new creations. And this, in a way, is a form of social justice, because without the university, without, whether the same people will be able to achieve this commercialization of their intellectual outputs. But I think the key thing is that education should be accessible to all. And in a globalized world, that's more and more important to be able to survive.
Thank you, Dr. Pascual. We're closing in our time, but I actually have a question that's directed towards Dr. Pascual, and it simply asks, is the 150% tax deductibility for donations successful?
Okay, that's an interesting question, because in the past, that the kind of incentive doesn't work, given that people were not filing the right income tax return. It will work only in a situation where there is strict enforcement of tax regulations, so that a legal way of shielding income from tax becomes important. Otherwise, that's not important at all. Now, with the new regime under our incumbent president, with his daan na tuwid, or straight and righteous path, with the strict enforcement of tax regulations, we are looking towards, attracting bigger donations. In fact, I have just gotten the largest ever corporate donation to the university. This is a donation of ₱500 million from a corporate donor.
In private, you can. Well, thank you. Our time for the session has pretty much come to a close. Please give another round of hand to our distinguished guests. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Actually, panelists, if you can please remain on stage, and our panelists, if you please join on stage. Dr. Underwood, at this time, would like to give his closing remarks, but this is also our photo op to have all our panelists up on stage. Thank you, everyone. Please enjoy the rest of the day.
Though I was not on the program to speak again, since I've been here, it has clearly been emphasized over and over again that the University of the Virgin Islands is a sister institution to the University of Guam, and we feel that very deeply in our hearts. And so we wanted, on the 60th anniversary celebration of our sister institution, to present something that may stay with you, since we aren't able to stay with you as much as we would like. So I would like to present this plaque on behalf of the trustees, students, faculty, and staff of the University of the Virgin Islands to President Underwood. It says, "Congratulations on your 60th anniversary celebration, celebrating the Trenton spirit. From the University of the Virgin Islands is proud to be a sister institution to the University of Guam. And there's a quote which I believe captures our similarities. It says, "Our educational paths are the same, and so shall be our triumphs." Presented on June 29th, 2012 to President Robert Underwood. The date is not correct, but we'll assume I gave it to him earlier. From all of us at the University of the Virgin Islands. Thank you very much.
Okay, I think we're going to get similar treatment from the president of the University of the Philippines, Dr. Pascual.
Thank you. Well, I didn't realize, that despite the absence of a formal relationship, between my university and yours, Dr. Underwood, that there have been activities going on, at the level of our faculties, like the work on archaeology that's going on between your faculty here and our faculty that's engaged in archaeological research. And let me just formalize, our greeting by way of this certificate. The Board of Regents and the President of the University of the Philippines send cordial greetings to the University of Guam on its 60th anniversary, done in Quezon City, Philippines, this 26th day of June 2012. Signed, Alfredo E. Pascual, President.
Well, what a wonderful panel. I tell you that there were so many ideas here that people have written down, and I know I'm going to hear about them for a long time. So first of all, I want to congratulate the whole panel one more time. And there's some memorable phrases along the way that we learn, like, you turn money into knowledge. Now, how do you turn knowledge into money? That's a good one. And of course, the quote from President Xi of the Ohio State University, and everyone will be using this. If you don't like change, you'll like irrelevance even less. So that's very, and it's just interesting to try to figure out exactly how to place a university in this context, because there are important questions about place and a responsibility to a particular place. And in this case, the University of Guam and its relationship to Guam. And then its relationship to the region, and then globalization, and then being U.S. accredited. And then we heard all these other opportunities in which maybe accreditation will become maybe less relevant over time as people get certified to do things across national borders. Who knows what are going to happen to engineers and accountants and all the various professions that there are, because as this process moves on, maybe within ASEAN and then eventually into APEC, and then for us, and then there'll be the contemplation of doing this on a regional basis. And then we heard all of this discussion about the political factors that are involved in, both for Fiji and the most notable example, I guess we think, because we hear about it in the news so much, is what happens in Fiji and what happens in the Philippines. We haven't heard too much about what happens in Guam, but unless you just listen to the radio all day, and then you'll hear it all, and then you get. So, at the end of the day, this is about how we try to conceptualize how we build into an economy, how we build a society, how we engage in politics. And as Dr. Fernandez took us back to the Morrill Act in 1862, and to think that, it's the 150th anniversary of a piece of legislation that was the first time that the federal government said they were going to give assistance to higher ed. And they did it in the middle of a civil war. They did it in the middle of a civil war. It certainly reminds me of the kind of commitment that the founders of the university had. The founders of the University of Guam made a commitment to establish a territorial college when rebuilding from World War II perhaps should have been their first priority. So sometimes political leaders, sometimes educational leaders, sometimes a society places a bet on the future. They make that bet. They place that bet because even though it may not pay off now, they'll know that it'll pay off in the future. And it certainly has in the course of the University of Guam. And we have a number of challenges. As I got off the car this morning to come up here, I was listening on the radio, and I'll meld two statistics together. The first statistic I heard on the radio is that Guam is the third largest marijuana smoking place in the world. This is according to a UN report. Something like 18% of the population has tried marijuana, has smoked marijuana within the past 5 years. Now I want you to just count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 as you go around the table, and you'll see that one of them, or maybe two, maybe this is the rate busting population in that. But so now that's 20% of the, nearly 20% of people aged 15 to 64, according to this. I don't know. Maybe Police Chief Fred Bordali will tell us how they arrived at this statistic. But the other statistic is that only 17% of the people of Guam have graduated from college. So if there was a way to blend those two statistics together, and just, make it exponentially take off. I don't know how we do it. Maybe it's the 150% tax idea. Maybe it's taxing marijuana. I don't know. Maybe it's all of these things. But it goes to show the kinds of challenges that we have. There's a lot of things out there. And some of them are solved by K-12 systems, workforce development, and the challenges that we face as an American. Part of being American society is that, the current thinking is that a high school graduate's going to change their job 22 or 23 times in the course of their life. They change jobs like they change cell phones. And so this means that the challenges of certification programs, community colleges, most people in society are going to have a lifelong relationship with a community college because of that. But yet, at the end of the day, too, you have to figure out where your entrepreneurs coming, where's your research and technology, where's your thinking, where's your forward thinking, where's all of these things that are going to come about, and how do you base those, and what are your core values? So I'm so grateful for this opportunity to host these fine presidents and chancellors and vice chancellors to come to Guam to help us celebrate this and provide us lots of food for thought. So another round of applause for them. And I want to acknowledge the work of Dr. Ann Hattori on this, who helped, and she's fabulous work. And now I'll give you back to Dr. John Sanchez.
Thank you. If we can have Dr. Underwood, everyone on stage up front for a photo op, please. At this time, we would like to recognize our sponsors for this event, the U.S. Department of Interior, the Honorable Anthony Babauta, United Airlines, Sheraton Guam. The committee would also like to recognize the hardworking students that we have in the audience who were able to shuttle your questions up here. So for our students in the audience, could we all please give them a round of applause? Thank you, everyone. Please enjoy the rest of your day.